Hey everyone, welcome to my first video. I'm the Doc Jedi, and I've thought about starting a channel for a long time now from watching Star Wars Theory, who is great, and I'm sure he'll either already has a review out or on the Acolyte, or we'll have one coming out around the release of this. I'll link his channel below. If you're not following him or subscribed to him for some reason, go ahead and do that. He's awesome. One of the most knowledgeable guys of Star Wars. And also Tuhqa. He doesn't necessarily do a whole lot of show reviews and lore stuff, but I love his channel. He does a lot of lightsaber reviews, which I'll have some coming soon. Hopefully, I got some here behind me. But yeah, I'll link his channel below too. So yeah, give him a follow, and let's get into it. The Acolyte has been a very divisive show within the Star Wars community. Probably the most divisive since, I mean, it makes the Disney movies look not that bad. But it might not be as bad as everyone is saying online and on YouTube. And then my rating system has three categories. We have cinematic, which we'll be touching on as a TV show, not necessarily as a Star Wars show, but just the directing, writing, acting, cinematography. The second category is rating it as a Star Wars show. So that means the in universe feel and the lore accuracy, which in this case might not be so great. The third and final category is dueling. My favorite part, and most people's favorite part about Star Wars projects, whether it's movies, TV shows, animated series, are the duels. Each of these categories is going to be on a 10-point scale. So without further ado, let's get into it. First category up is the cinematic aspect of the show. Uh, Honestly, it was not very good. I gave it a 3 out of 10 with the exceptions to episode 5, which had your first big fight, and 8, the finale, which I thought was actually a pretty good episode. In my opinion, the visuals were just off. The clothing seemed stiff. It didn't seem worn in. The color scaling of the clothes, the backgrounds, the environments, and even the lighting was just off. It didn't seem natural, and throughout every episode, I found myself sitting there, and instead of listening to the dialogue or really focusing on the subtleties of the acting, I found myself trying to find what was off. The whole time I just thought something was off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I think that's what it was. And it really took away from the show as a whole. It might seem nitpicky, really took me out of those first episodes. And every time we cut back to the Jedi Council, and they're all looks like they're wearing cardboard. Looks like a bad cosplay. Along with that, the directing and writing just lacked conviction. I don't know if it's because there were multiple different directors who did episodes. It shouldn't be an issue because shows like The Mandalorian have multiple directors running different episodes, and seasons 1 and 2 of that were peak Star Wars. So that isn't an excuse, but it's something that I noticed that could fall down to the showrunner, Leslie Headland. Maybe she didn't give each director a strong enough focal point as to what the show's about and where they should be following it. Now, there were actually some strong story points and character arcs that I was interested in, but the writing was just lazy, and they didn't carry out the character arcs or the storylines that I was interested in. A great one was Torben when Mother Anastasia is getting in his head, and he seems really tortured, convicted, like he wants to leave that planet. I was like, okay, why? Why does he want to go home? There has to be, a real reason. And I thought that was interesting. I thought, maybe he has family back home that he wants to get to. Again, connections which Jedi shouldn't have. But maybe there's a real reason that he wanted to get back to Coruscant. But it ended up just being that he was homesick. A Jedi Padawan who's on this mission, that's what they were dreaming about. They don't want to sit in Coruscant and all that. No, they want to get out on planets, they want to go on missions, which Torben was lucky enough to go on, and he's homesick. Maybe it's just me, but I thought that was super lazy and just didn't make sense, and it really took me out, and I was like, what is going on here? Time for the second and arguably most important category, which is the Star Wars category. Once again, I gave it a 3 out of 10. Obviously, it broke canon, and I was not a fan of the whole how the twins came about. Took away from Anakin's story, what made him special. I just didn't understand it. Like, come up with your new thing. Disney as a whole has just kind of reused old tropes, instead of trying to come up with their own characters, their own backstories, um, which will make us love a character. But instead, they're taking things that George Lucas and Dave Filoni have created and just kind of repurposing it, but in a way worse way. Other ways they broke canon. Born of the Force. I don't get how the witches figured this out, but Plagueis couldn't. It just didn't make sense to me, and Plagueis, we'll get to that later. Ki-Adi-Mundi, that's been talked about at length. I don't feel the need to go over it. Yoda not sensing any of this, none of the High Council sensing any of this, none of the High Council being involved. I mean, Yoda can sense Anakin slaying Tusken Raiders, he can sense Order 66, he can sense the pain and suffering of all the Jedi around him, but he can't sense these, 7 to 10 Jedi being slain at a time of peace? But he could sense Anakin killing Tusken Raiders during an active war. Just didn't make sense to me at all. Once again, there were some interesting story points, like, what really happened with the witches? How'd they come about? Were they offshoot of the Night Sisters somehow? It just seemed like, yep, here they are. Whatever. We don't even have to talk about the song Power of Many. That was some of the worst Star Wars I've ever seen. Corbin was a really interesting character. Again, why was he just homesick? There had to be a better reason for him wanting to go back to Coruscant. Why he felt so much suffering that he killed himself? He didn't really do anything. Yes, he led the charge to go back to the Coven to find the Virgins, but it's not like he killed the witches. It's not like he got attacked by Kanaka. The witches got into his head, but that's enough. I feel like a Jedi would have just been stronger and not gone to those lengths, but maybe that's just me. I also really liked Soul's inner turmoil. I thought he was a really interesting character, probably the best character on the show outside of maybe Kamir. I found him really interesting. He was just a super emotional Jedi. There's been a lot of comparisons to Qui-Gon Jinn, but Qui-Gon was like the most stoic and perfect Jedi. Didn't let emotions get to him. He took so much time with Anakin, doing this blood test. He still wasn't sure, to see him pod race first to see if he was, really force sensitive, instead of just like Soul showing up on a planet and seeing a girl once in the woods and being, I sense a connection. That's my Padawan. That just seemed forced. Seemed really emotional. He's constantly yelling. I don't get the Qui-Gon Jinn comparisons, and I wanted to flesh out more why he felt inner turmoil, but instead of addressing it, he just keeps saying, I'll explain it later, to Osha and May. He says that probably 4 times throughout the first couple episodes, and then it just lost interest. It's like, okay, are you ever going to end up telling? And it goes to this whole flashback episode, and you find out why, but even then, yes, he killed Mother Anastasia, but she was somehow turning into this black smoke, and also turning May into it. So what else is a Jedi supposed to do there besides take out the threat? Made sense to me. As far as the in-universe feel goes, it wasn't very great. Talked about in the first section how the clothing just felt off. It seemed stiff, looked like cosplayers. And even the casting, no one felt like a Jedi when you looked at them besides Soul and Indara, really, but Indara dies the first episode to basically a throwing knife. But then we have people getting stabbed in the stomach who live. So, yeah, that's a whole different story. And when they're on the planet searching for the Virgins in episode 7, Kalnaka literally has a metal detector. Like, it's a straight up metal detector. I laughed. I had to pause the show and go back because I missed some dialogue. But it was just horrific. George Lucas, I know he made a lot of comments about it. I think he called them gizmos. Small additions that you put on normal objects to make it in universe, make it feel like Star Wars. And this show just didn't have a lot of that. Now, something I did really like the show did was acknowledge Legends and the extended universe. Kamir using cortosis was really cool. I thought that was a really unique and different way to combat lightsabers. So it's really cool to have a metal used as a helmet, and I thought the arm guard was really cool. that when a lightsaber hits it, it can short it out for a little bit, giving you a huge advantage. So I thought that was really cool. Something that I really appreciated. Something that people had a really hard time with that I saw on the internet and Twitter and whatever was May saying "See you in hell." People had it blew up over that, and I don't get it. Like at first, I was like, "Okay, yeah, I could see where you're coming from," but Han Solo says it in Empire, and no one cares. Now, something I did have a really big issue with was Osha bleeding the crystal. At first, I was like, okay, that's actually pretty cool. Visually, it was stunning. I liked seeing the crystal like it coated in the red, and then the blade being emitted after, and it's blue, and then the red slowly grow. It was really cool. But then I thought about it, I was like, that makes no sense. You have Soul confronting her, saying, yes, I killed Mother Anastasia, but it was to protect you from the witches, and I lied about it to protect you from the Jedi, which is true. I mean, he did his job. Osha, she doesn't even look mad. She doesn't look angry. She looks sad. And the crystal bleeds. And then she somehow knows how to force choke when she has no other experience with the force prior to that. It made no sense. Sure, now she's using the dark side. Yes, dark side helps you grow in the force faster, but it's not taking you to 0 to force choking immediately. It just didn't make sense. On top of that, we have Anakin in episode 3 slaughtering younglings, taking out the whole Jedi Temple, and then going to Mustafar, choking Padme, and then fighting Obi-Wan, and he's still got a beautiful blue blade. Doesn't make sense. Now I know, I'm pretty sure it was around 2015 maybe that they really came out with the whole bleeding crystal thing in some of the comics, and they talk about how long it took him to bleed his crystal, and he's sitting over it, pouring all his hatred into it, and yes, he's still conflicted, which is why it took so long. Like, it's not just a wishy-washy process, and she just does it like that immediately. It made no sense. If that was the case, anytime a Jedi got a little angry, their crystal would bleed. Mace Windu taps into the dark side for Vopat and some of his other techniques, but his crystal doesn't bleed when he uses those. It just didn't make sense. Staying on the Sith issue, how does no one have Sith eyes anymore? Now let's get into the final category, which is dueling, the lightsaber battles, the fighting as a whole. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. It was by far the best part of the show. It was the best stunt coordination and dueling since Nick in the prequels. It was a very different style. Nick's style was a little more cinematic. Uses of force and hand-to-hand combat throughout the show were really cool. When Soul's standing there and he's got both of Kamir's blades coming in from the side and Kamir's attacking from the front, and he pulls this force move and they all shoot back. That was awesome. That was so cool. So that was definitely the best part of the show. Something I didn't like as much, a lot of the finale fights did give a kind of Matrix vibe, which I didn't really love. The slow-mo, I don't really like slow-mo as a whole. Maybe that's just me. You can let me know in the comments, but it felt like a mix of Matrix and Shang-Chi, the Marvel movie. The overall rating of the show, I'd give a 3.5 out of 10. You might be seeing that doesn't make sense. You gave 2 of the categories a 3 and then a 7.5. How do you get to 3.5? Fighting's a small part of it. I'd rather it be great writing, great acting, great directing, and then just okay fights. If you look at Ahsoka, there was a lot better writing poured into it, a lot better directing. The fights were not that great. Osha and May as characters, there could have been a lot more to it. There was no weight into any of it. That was the issue. If you're going to have these characters have such big character changes, there has to be some weight into it. Something where I'm like, oh, okay, I could see why they are changing, but there wasn't that. And then you have Darth Basil? What? The little gopher? Well, it was so confusing. He's leading them to Kelnaka. and because I guess they can't use the Force to sense where people are at. In the finale, May gets away. Basil is still on the ship with Soul, and Soul's following her, which was a cool scene. I did like that, how they went through the belt around the planet. And then Basil sabotages the ship and they both go crashing down. I was like, is this going to be a Darth Jar Jar situation? And while it was no means my favorite show as a whole, I do want a season two. If they listen to the audience feedback, I think it could turn into something okay, but I think it could be all right. So we'll see what happens with that if they get renewed for a second season. Because at the end of the day, bad Star Wars is better than no Star Wars. Now, if you're still here, watch the whole video. Thank you so much. Feel free to subscribe. We should have a couple lightsaber reviews coming soon. Got a couple here behind me. They should be coming in the next week or so. So stay tuned for those.